Welcome to In the 661, where we talk about issues that are of importance to our community, but specifically to the community of young people here in Kern County. Josth Stenner is with Faith in the Valley in Kern County. First off, welcome. Thanks for talking to us.
Thanks for having me.
So maybe help first off to kind of give an idea of what Faith in the Valley does here in Kern County.
Sure. Yeah, so Faith in the Valley we're actually a network. We're part of 5 different chapters in the Central Valley. But in Kern County, we represent over 20 churches and thousands of families within those churches. And we're community organizers at our core, and we organize around issues that are impacting our communities, brainstorm solutions with those community members, and implement those solutions, build campaigns to deal with police violence, to end the school to prison pipeline, to deal with immigration and all the stuff that's going on, to just make our communities better.
One of the things that you guys are really highlighting right now, which is kind of an interesting time, we have 2 internal candidates running for the district attorney position, Scott Spielman and Cynthia Zimmer. What is your take on that? It's been a while where we had really kind of a seemingly very competitive and close race.
Yeah, it's been over 35 years. I mean, I like to say that the position for district attorney has kind of been handed down, right? So if anyone knows anything about Ed Jagels, he was in power for over 30 years, and he just handed it to Lisa Green. And it was her announcing her retirement that was like, okay, 2 people will pop up. I hear things are a little tense in the office, but
it's a very competitive race, I'll say that. I've seen some of the ads.
Yeah, it is a very competitive race. And we just had a candidates forum where we invited both of those candidates and both of the sheriff's candidates to talk about, why people should vote for them, but also what the importance of the DA is, because I don't think a lot of people realize how crucial and how much power the district attorney has.
Why don't you talk about that? We got a couple of minutes here.
Cool.
Why is it important for the kids that are watching and for the adults that are watching? Why is the DA position in your mind so important?
Yeah. Well, the DA ultimately gets to charge people. They get to decide what happens when somebody gets arrested, right? So the police will find you for something and they'll charge you, and the district attorney decides whether to bring those charges. So let's say in the example of a young person who gets arrested for the first time for tagging up a wall or something close to their school. The DA could choose to press a misdemeanor or something heavier on them, or could choose an alternative route and say, maybe we want to focus on the rehabilitation of this young person who it's his first time being incarcerated or first time dealing with law enforcement, and make them clean up the graffiti, make them teach a class to young people. So the DA has all this power to divert people from one way, from funneling into the criminal justice system to the jails and all that stuff, and rehabilitating folks. And they also have the power to decide what happens when an officer is involved in an officer-involved shooting, right? When an officer kills an innocent member of the community, it's ultimately the DA locally that gets to decide whether to bring charges on that officer or not.
And I want to dig into both of those issues because they've been in and of themselves very controversial. Let's start with one of them. I'll play devil's advocate, right? Because there has been a huge shift when they were talking about restorative justice with the discipline that was going on in the high schools, and there was a lawsuit, and there was a bunch of pushback, essentially saying, hey, you are suspending and disproportionately punishing students of color, and we should kind of dial that back and start working on rehabilitating and finding alternative methods. And then there was a bunch of media coverage just recently that said, it seemed to suggest it's not working. You're hearing anecdotal stories from teachers, specifically at Bakersfield High School, where they were kind of talking about students run amok, where the students felt like they could control the conversation, could control the punishment, and the teachers felt powerless. That basically we know that we're going to have these kids kind of be put through a program, and there's no punishment. Without the stick, there's no punishment. The kids kind of can do what they want. So how do you find that balance between wanting to rehabilitate but also having teeth and enforcement, right? It's almost like a parent and a child relationship. How do you have that relationship where the kids know the rules and they behave, but you're not being overbearing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a complicated balance to strike. I also think that, that maybe we're not getting the full story. I'd love to hear more from the young people to see if really the implementation of the lawsuit has been the thing that has begun to cause this, or whether it's now teachers that are more aware have something to point at that they never really agreed with, but that they can now name a policy and say, well, it's this thing that's causing all this strife. This is why, where it's like really high schools have been like, the struggle for discipline was the struggle that I had when I was a student in school. So I think it's a difficult balance to strike, but I think it's also, the other question that can be asked is like, when do you decide that a child is like disposable, that you can't continue to invest in a child? And PBIS, I think, is one of those things that we're going through sort of a growing period, where growing pains, I guess is what they call it, where we need to give it, I think, a little bit more time to understand fully the impacts and see those impacts play out in our youth.
And let me dig into the second issue, which you brought up, which comes to issues of police brutality or overuse of force, because I hear almost the same or similar argument when it comes to that realm, and it comes down to personal responsibility, right? If police don't use force in certain cases, devil's advocate, people will say this is what happens. Officers get killed, and when people don't follow the law, officers are out there to do a job. Their job is a dangerous one at times. If people don't take personal responsibility, when the officer says, "Hey, put your hands up," I'm not sure what's in your hands, and that person doesn't, and then they get shot, they feel like there's a lot of pushback from the community, but they feel like there's no personal responsibility from that person who didn't put their hands up. And then on the flip side of it, right, you hear from the folks who say, police overstep their bounds and their authority all the time. Yeah. So how do you strike a balance in that situation?
I mean, I think the balance is, from my perspective, that the police go through extensive training to become a police officer. And a lot of that training is de-escalation training around implicit bias, and we're always interested in helping the police get more training. But we can't expect, but the community, on the other hand, doesn't get that training, doesn't get the training for how to react and doesn't know how to navigate when they are put into a particular situation. And so I think we can't put the onus on the community as saying, well, they didn't listen to what they had to say, so they deserved it, or anything like that. I think the onus comes on how well can we train our police officers, how well can they represent the communities that they come from, that we come from, and how well can we open up the police department so that they have transparency, they have accountability, and that we know what those measures are, that they're not just holding themselves accountable, right? Because if I ask you to hold one of your assistants accountable for any type of thing, you're going to be a little bit more lenient because you have a relationship. It's just the nature of humans. It's nothing saying about the police department. And so I think that's why one of the biggest things that we're sort of going for is an Office of Independent Review that sits outside of the police department, that allows community members, maybe old police officers, to review use of force cases so that it is disconnected. And if they find it is disconnected from the police force, and if they find that nothing was wrong, then I think the community would have a little bit more faith in that than just the police themselves kind of rubber stamping.
Well, right now, the DA's office is performing that secondary review, which kind of brings us back full circle to the way the conversation started. And Josh, we're out of time, but I really appreciate you talking to me.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us.
Oh, awesome.
All right, and thank you for joining us on In the 661 as we continue to dive into topics that are of importance to the youth in our community.